Good day, everyone. Hello to all of you listening out there, and welcome to our sixth episode of the Frame by Frame podcast, your podcast for all things UX and UI, not just the seasoned veterans, but for those looking to get into the industry, people who've just joined, and also junior UX designers all the way up to seniors. This week's topic or theme will center around portfolios. Now, arguably, your portfolio is the most important thing, to some extent more important than the CV, because that is what will showcase your UX or and UI talents. Now, it's not the easiest thing in the world. You may think, oh, portfolio, that's just text and pictures. Yes, but it goes beyond that. It's more than just text and pictures. You have to be able to use those text and pictures and diagrams to sell your skills in order to increase your chances of getting a job. Now, of course, you could have the perfect portfolio, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you will get a job. It could be that a recruiter doesn't look at it. It could be that there are problems on your website that no one else is able to look at it. But regardless, it is still a vital selling point for you to get a job in this field. So that's the main theme. The sub themes revolving around that is we're going to talk about portfolios as a bootcamp student, as a junior UX designer, and even portfolios if you are an experienced UX or UI designer. It's just like a CV. You always update it. You omit the previous experiences or the previous case studies that may be inferior to the ones you've already done or greater experiences. So today, it is going to be centered around portfolios, and we're going to be discussing various themes, good tips, do's and don'ts, and how you can increase your chances of being spotted by a recruiter or a company, and with the intention of being able to get a job. So, yeah. I will let Will start because I know he's very passionate about this subject, as indeed Zach is. So take it away, guys.
Cool. Thank you, Cross. So I am not affiliated with Career Foundry in any official capacity, but I do mentor a Career Foundry student. I'm not one of the official mentors, just I do mentoring for this guy. And I've noticed that he's really stressed about the decisions around making the portfolio, especially about time left in his course and the time to create the portfolio. And I think that whether you're full time doing the bootcamp or part time, I really think the best move is to just put your portfolio on Behance. Just have Behance host your stuff while you're still in bootcamp, unless they require you to have a separate kind of site. Then, of course, do what they tell you. But if you're in CF, I think you are absolutely hosting it on Behance while you're still in the course. And then once you graduate, I think you're moving on to another site of your choice when you actually have the time to really dive deep, understand your options, and flesh out a more full portfolio. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'll kick off with that. I completely agree. That was the process I did. I had only heard of Behance as a student, and I think from what I'm told, from what I saw in Slack and other channels, that Behance is really the go-to place unless people have their own websites. Maybe they were perhaps a graphics designer or something, but generally, Behance is the one where it's quick and it's effective. But what we have to remember about Behance, even though it's changed a little bit, more to do with UX UI portfolios, Behance is more to do with graphics, showcasing what you've created digitally, etc. But yeah, I completely concur with you, Will, that Behance, yeah, it's quick and easy. Although personally, I hated it at first. Um, but yeah, Behance is the thing to do for the portfolio. But I know that for example, my mentor mentioned that Behance is used by pupils, well, students of Career Foundry, and even indeed other boot camps. I hazard a guess would do the same. That it is more just for completing the portfolio for the course. But I would say that yeah, it doesn't hurt to have Behance, to have as many sites as possible, but I think that you have to go beyond Behance. So it could be anything such as Wix,
Absolutely.
Webflow. I mean, it took longer for me to get used to Wix than it did Behance, but I found that with Wix, and I'm not advertising them. I'm just simply saying what I feel about them is with Wix is well, first of all, you can have as many projects, or I think it's up to five to showcase without having to buy a premium plan. But it was also enabled me to be more customizable and they had more user friendly tools where it made it actually just as quick once you had got used to the tools and the interface and the layout. So I can't agree with you more on that statement. Where I mean, Behance, just to finish off, yes, do it for your career foundry, but as far as your real life portfolio, and by real life I mean as in it's not an exercise, I think you have to go beyond Behance, Wix, Webflow, your own site, anything like that.
Yeah, I personally don't like Behance because it was originally as a quick way for graphic designers to throw their stuff into something viewable that could be sent out because that took a lot of time.
Yeah,
Like when I was
yeah,
first in
yeah,
school, computers weren't what they are now, and everything wasn't digital. Like I had a physical portfolio that I had to lug around to interviews and drag everywhere with me. And not only was it expensive to make one, but it was super inconvenient. And then when everything got digital, I had to figure out a way to get all of my stuff now digital. And so that was their solution is, well, if you're making it on the computer, you just put it right to Behance. And I mean, it works for a UX portfolio. It wouldn't be my first choice just because that's not how I know Behance.
Right.
um, there's really simple sites. I mean, you'll have to pay. Like the UX Folio site's great, but I think if you want more than three uh, case studies in there, you have to pay for that.
yeah. You do. I've got one on UX Folber. It was unfinished because then I discovered Wix and I was recommended Wix by my mentor from Career Foundry.
Yeah, see, and when you're first starting out, I would avoid paying for anything that you don't like. If you can get it for free, why would you pay? To me, there's no point.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to cost you money, and you don't have an income at that point for UX. So don't. I don't know. I wouldn't even dabble with it at that point. It's not a necessity. I think at some point, if you hit the level where you would like to buy your domain and put all that stuff on there, then why not? But even I personally don't own my own domain. I used to for my illustration and graphic design portfolio, and then there just came a time where even then I wasn't. I think website hits are so low sometimes. There's no point, especially if you're finding your main stuff is word of mouth or you're doing all the footwork anyway. Um, yeah, so I personally like Webflow. They have a great free thing, and you can do really cool stuff on there, like parallax scrolling if that's what you're into. They have all kinds of options for free. The templates and stuff are where it gets expensive, and if you want to have your own official domain name, you have to pay for it. But it's not worth it in the beginning. I don't think you're just trying to get your foot in the door in multiple ways. You're trying to get your portfolio done, and you're trying to get some interviews going. So you got to just choose. Like I don't know how many PDFs I've gotten to look at as far as portfolios, and that works. It's page after page, and each page has a link to Google Docs or something. So it just you got to pick what fits you and what fits your budget, especially.
Exactly. I understand. And like one of the reasons why I love saying, "Hey, do Behance first," is because your first portfolio or your first draft is probably going to suck and you're probably going to redo it multiple times. I think I've made just my hero section on my front page at least 4 different times. And the idea of having a bootcamp student who is pressed for time because they have that time limit on the course, the idea of having them spend all this time on a first draft in any of these programs is a nightmare when you have that ticking clock on you. And so that's why I love just saying, hey, do Behance now. The first version is going to suck. You do not want to have to redo it 4 different times while you're still in the course. It's just not worth your time.
Yep. No, it's and it's, you're going to see a lot of advice on LinkedIn, which I disagree with. I don't disagree with the advice. I disagree shopping around continuously. Like, at some point, you're going to hit 12 different opinions, and they're literally 12 different opinions. They might touch on one commonality somewhere, but it's never going to be the solution. And since everybody's different and everybody has their own focus, I just told this to somebody yesterday when they asked about portfolio, and take what you're interested in, because that's how most people, that's how you're going to stand out now, especially because, if you look at 100 portfolios, 98 of them are going to look relatively the same. I mean, they're not going to be cookie cutter, but it's close because everybody's showing all the information they have. And I think if you want to go into, if you want to be a researcher or do interviews, focus on that. Like, put all the information in your portfolio, but don't highlight everything. Highlight what you're passionate about, because that'll shine through when somebody looks at your portfolio. And maybe if they're hiring a researcher and you focused your portfolio on research, go figure, you'll probably get a call back. Whereas if you just generalize everything and put as much information about each section as you can, it all gets lost in the noise, if that makes sense. Like, somebody hiring is just, that's what they're going to get. It's just noise at that point.
Right. And like, if everything is highlighted, nothing is highlighted.
Yeah. It's I don't know what you'd call that. It's just difficult. Like, there's no right or wrong way to do a portfolio, and that's also what makes it difficult. So anybody struggling with a portfolio, you can always just reach out to people, ask. You're going to get different opinions, but it's just like doing research. Take all the information you're getting and kind of narrow it down to see what happens. And I think a good way to go about it too, I wish I would have done that, is ask people who are hiring. Be like, I'm not applying, I just want to know what I can do. And maybe they don't have time. I know what that's like. And you don't always have time to get to everybody, but you might be surprised how many people are willing to help somebody out and be like, look, this is what I'm looking for in a portfolio. That doesn't mean it fits every company, but that's what I look for. And so you start to get an idea of what people hiring or looking through portfolios, throughout the day are looking at or looking for. And then you get 10 of those people and run the numbers and see, where the common place is. And that's what you should focus on maybe as a new student, because you're getting experience in a wide range of different specialities in UX. Like, you're covering everything in a boot camp. So if you're coming out of a boot camp, pick what you like. Otherwise, you'll end up with like what I had for my first portfolio, and it was just noise. It's still noise when I look at it. I don't know. But I'm very picky. Like, I don't know. I'll never be 100% satisfied with my portfolio, I don't think.
I gotcha. There's always room for improvement on this. One thing that I've been telling myself about it for a while is, well, I know how there are 12 plus different versions of how you should do it according to different LinkedIn and YouTube gurus, but I realize that I just plain feel the best about my portfolio when I'm the one making the decisions about it. When I'm not just trying to follow one person's advice. When I do what I feel is right and what I feel I want to do, that's when I feel the most confident about it. However, I'm not the one with UX paycheck right now, so maybe that advice is wrong, but I feel good about it, and that's what allows me to actually open it up and look at it and not feel bad about it. So that's what I do. And when it comes to improving my portfolio, There are some lessons I've learned along the way, such as people remember what they see, not what they read. I like that one a lot. But what I do to improve mine the most is I just go to LinkedIn. I find the people who have been designers for a while. I go to contact info and I open up their portfolios. I just go and look at senior designers' portfolios. I see what I like. Obviously, they've been doing the job for a while, so whatever they have works. And whether it's case study structure or UI elements, I take whatever I like and I shove it into mine.
But why not? Like, if somebody has a system
Exactly.
that's working for them, really, why not?
Yeah, I think I straight up took a button style format right from one of my friend's portfolios. I actually met with him over Zoom for the first time about 2 weeks ago, and I told him, like, hey, look at this. I actually just took it straight from yours. He laughed. He liked that a lot. He said, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it's a lot quicker than just slamming your head against the wall thinking of what might work.
It makes sense, yeah. It makes total sense.
And I remember when I was looking back through all the different tools, I saw Squarespace, Webflow, WordPress, Wix, UXfolio, and all that. I was working part-time at the time, so I did have some money to use, and it was very important to me to have my own domain name. I did end up going with Squarespace. I have been very happy with it. I did spend about $200 combined with the domain name and the editing tools. I've been happy with it. I only just discovered that I have access to the site analytics, which is kind of embarrassing that it took me 11 months to find that. But they have that. I'm sure most other websites have site analytics available to you.
Wow, 11 months.
If I were to do it again, I would still
that's a
start with
long time.
Behance just like I did, and then
Um,
switch after I graduated.
wow.
I would
Yeah,
probably consider
so
Webflow a little bit more
for me,
seriously. Yeah, Cross?
yeah, I was just going to say for my portfolio, I don't know whether I can say whether it's standard or non-standard. I don't know because as much as I've listened to advice, one of my gripes with advice is sometimes I think, don't ask for advice unless you really have no idea, because I think there's a sort of dependency to rely on advice that you end up not getting anything done. For example, DeepL, as much as I use that for the odd quick translation, if I know for well, if I relied on that to translate everything, I would actually find it would be detrimental to my German ability. So when it comes to the portfolio, I take the same tack with it, and that it's not that I do what I want in terms of going against design rules or concepts or anything, but for me, I like to keep my portfolio simple. I mean, I'm not a flashy person by nature, and I think that a portfolio really is not only an extension, or it shouldn't just be an extension of your professional skills, but I think it should also be an extension of who you are as a person. I think that you should inject your personality into it. So, of course, you don't want to have yellow on white, for example, or white on yellow. But at the same time, you don't necessarily need to just have black and white. You could have a color scheme as long as it's easygoing on the eyes. Um, and I think this is what people have to do. I think more people need confidence in their portfolio. I mean, I will not pretend for 1 second that my portfolio is the best, great, or even good in terms of what others may see it as. But what I do like, and I can relate to what you were saying, Will, is it is my own. I can say, well, all of these ideas are my own. They're original, and I actually feel better about it. And it's like when we were talking, Zach, about the portfolio, the text, how long it should be. I think, I mean, to be honest, to come back to what I was saying about having your own personality injected into it, is I actually prefer reading more and understanding the journey and the discovery and see and also understanding more about the person whose portfolio I am perusing. And I like to see that. I like the detail, not to get distracted by detail, but I think that if someone's like the way I do things is I narrate. I like to be telling a story. So even if I have a lot of text, I like to think that the way I write it, the words I use, the way I put it across, idioms I use, that it actually keeps someone engaged to the point where they forget how long it is and they actually walk away. I hope they walk away thinking, oh, actually, that was a really nice story telling of a process. And that is what user experience is about in terms of the research. You're telling a story based on ingredients such as the origins of it, the testing, prototyping. It is just a story. It has a start and a middle and an end. And I think it's really important to make sure that a potential recruiter or company sees the consistency in you as a person. So, for example, I'm not going to copy someone else's portfolio if I, for example, don't like the color combination, or I think there's too much emphasis on the graphics, or there's not enough text. But at the same time, I wouldn't discourage people from looking at the successful people who have the portfolios. You can get a tip or two, but I think if you when you get advice, like you were saying, Zach, you get 12 people give you different conflicting advice, and you end up sometimes feeling less confident than you did before you asked those people. So I think you should reason with yourself and think, well, what is the best course of action, or in this case, what is the best design I can do based on what I think people will want. And again, it's UX is everywhere, and even that is a case study in itself, because you're working out, okay, I've got a concept, i.e., a portfolio. How do I sell myself and my skills on there? And to find that out, you have to do research. You get opinions and what have you, but you have to get the right opinions. So ask people like the recruiters, especially if they're recruiters who have a UX background, or UX designers, people who are in the field. And that's why I listened to my tutor and mentor. I got them to go through my first case study, my main case study, and I had more information on there in terms of all the processes. I mean, I still keep grids and spacing because I think it was relevant for the alignment, but there are some things that you learn in the boot camp that you don't need to put on your portfolio. And I think it's important to have your individual expression in that portfolio. And again, with text, I technically all the times I write, it is a reflection of how long I can speak. But I like to think that with my speaking, my writing is also relevant. It's interesting. It keeps people engaged. It's not just waffling on about a small detail. It's covering everything. And I think that if you write short sentences or you write long paragraphs, as long as you're keeping the person engaged, and if they're really engaged, even if they've got time constraints, they're going to want to read it. They're going to like what they see, and when you like what you see or you hear, you stick with it, even if otherwise it would be monotonous or long or boring. So I do agree with those points. But I will add that your portfolio needs to be an extension of you, because when you go into a workplace, especially a skilled job like a designer, UX, UI, product, graphic, web, whatever. And I also say that as a former graphics and web designer, that when you go into a company, into a new job, you're not going to be like anyone else. You're not going to be agreeing with everyone's opinions. They're not going to be agreeing with yours. You're going to have your own different way of doing things. But I don't think the solution is to be uniform and clinical. It's a case of, well, harness all the different creative aspects or opinions and find a common ground in it.
So
Then
here's
you
some
get to do
food for
something.
thought about that. So
Yeah, you're in it. You're in it. So yeah, I think this is
here's a
something
little
you can
food
really
for
say.
thought. I Thanks to TikTok, the average human attention span is currently under 8 seconds, and people don't read.
Mm,
People no longer
that's
read.
deplorable. That's
If it
deplorable.
takes somebody more than 3 seconds to run through a sentence, like get started and get hooked, you lose them. 8 seconds you have to get somebody to stick. In the 1970s, it was closer to 20 seconds. And then you take somebody who, I don't really do the TikTok. I do like Instagram Reels. They're great. It's a great waste of time. But no, people don't read. If they see a block of words, they'll skip it. And then you take somebody who's under stress, has a huge workload on their plate, and got added more work by having to look through portfolios. I don't care if something catches my eye. If it's going to take me 5 minutes to read through a paragraph and I already wasn't interested in that section, I'm not reading it. I'm not going back. I'm going to read what flashed at me and what got that attention in that 8 seconds. And I know, and I understand why a lot of people aren't getting callbacks or aren't even having their portfolios looked at, because A, there's no time, and B, companies are doing the years of experience. And I think that's really unfair to some really talented designers out there. You actually gave me the name of one, and I looked through her portfolio, and it was super. And she has no design experience. She didn't even do graphic design before, and I'm actually surprised by that. And but she kept things super short and super sweet, so you got the attention, and all of a sudden it was like she had your attention, and you didn't have to read 5 paragraphs or half a book about why this research happened or what was good, what came out of it. Like, she got right to the point.
There are 24 hours in the day, right? And it's well known now that people are busier than ever. And I think the problem is people don't find time to relax. So because there's more and more pressure to get things done, people are taking on more than what they can handle, which causes this. And it's like what I was saying with the UX and UI roles being blurred. It's not a case of having excellence in one thing. It's a case of having satisfaction or something satisfactory in both. And for me, the 3 seconds thing, I wouldn't even get out of bed for 3 seconds. If someone's got a sentence saying I achieved this because of this, da da da, I've got nothing to work with on that. Whereas if someone mentions a paragraph, and I think this is probably because I don't have TikTok or Facebook or any of that rubbish. I'm still living like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. For me, I like to read. I like a story. I like to get an impression of the person behind it. I like unique things. And if we all just, which is true, it is how it is these days. I'm not disagreeing with how things are. I'm just disagreeing with why they are. And that's the thing. I need something to work with. So if I'm looking through something, it's like, okay, I've got an idea of who this person is. I like to see the uniqueness, the individuality. And I think, and I've made posts about this on LinkedIn, that if you keep, everything has to be less than 3 seconds, short, concise, and there is a time and a place for everything. But if everything has to be short and concise, it's generic. And I think then it goes from being generic to, okay, who's got the most experience? And so I am agreeing with you in, I guess, from a different angle, Zach. I think that I'm just not as accepting of the current climate as probably as what you are, as what a lot of other people are. I mean, quite often, even when I was a child, it was very hard. Even if I saw the flaws and the holes in a system, it was very hard sometimes for me to actually play by it, even if I knew that it wasn't beneficial for me to go against it. But having said that, I think that if someone really has the talent, well, actually, not just that, I think that if people step back, didn't take on so much, I think you would actually find time to be able to get everything done. Sure, it would take longer, but I think the quality would be higher. But nowadays, time equals money. Everything is about money, maximizing profit, minimizing costs. But the problem with that is it ignores the human aspect. And that's why even now, even people who have jobs, from some research I was doing, I think it was, what was it? Was it with Harvard or something? Even people who have the jobs that they really enjoy, they don't enjoy them as much as people who might have had the unskilled jobs 20, 30 years ago. But the people back then enjoyed it more because it was not a lazy pace. But it was a calmer pace. It was manageable. And I think that is the problem. So yeah, if you're doing a portfolio, you have to conform to the current status quo. I mean, for me, again, I'm definitely someone. I think you guys know this about me by now, as I'm definitely someone who's independent, to put it mildly. Um, but but it ties in with everything that I like. Is I like things to be challenging, mentally stimulating. So I guess maybe I make things more difficult for myself than what they need to be, regardless of whether I see how to make things easier. But then my mental stimulation gets uh, it, it's it it it's not there when I'm having to do something that is just, in my opinion, very generic, clinical, quick. I prefer, like that saying, a stitch in time saves nine. So you put in some extra effort now, you'll actually get further on. So yeah, I would say I'm a big fanatic, not a fanatic, but a big fan of, sometimes short-term pain, long-term gain, not short-term gain, long-term pain. And if people aren't happy, if you don't get the right people in the jobs, I think we've got a bit of an echo here. Um, I think if you just go by years of experience, or you just go solely by the best portfolio and a good CV, you don't know necessarily if that person, if they're really talented and they work on this, you don't know if that person is going to stay with the company or whether they're going to use it with a stepping stone. So I very much believe in investing in the person, not just the skills and experience. I,
I
I
think
mean, if I'm
that's
a recruiter or
I think that's
no, so yeah,
where
so I just
it's the company's responsibility at that point. Like if you want to keep an employee, then you better be the best place they could have ever wished to work. And even if they do leave
well,
at that
yeah,
point, that's on them.
yeah, exactly. But I think that if we want to go with saving on costs and stuff, invest in someone who is going to, who you have a good idea who's going to be there long term. I mean, a junior UX designer, sure, they don't have the knowledge of a senior UX designer and the experience, but th they will want to learn, so they will be there for, especially given how tough it is to get a job. I think if junior UX and UI designers are more afforded more opportunities and chances, you'll get a good return of investment, even if they leave after a year or 2 years. But I was looking at this myself. I was thinking, if I was a senior UX designer and I've got 5 or 10 years and I need a job, like we talked about, we touched upon this in a previous episode, that senior UX designers are actually accepting pay losses, pay cuts, just to be able to get the roles because it's so oversaturated and competitive. But if I were a senior UX designer, I wouldn't actually think, okay, if I'm taking a pay cut, I wouldn't think, right, well, this I'm just going to take a job because I need it. It almost becomes where you lose the passion and you just need the job to get you by. And then if something better came along, I'd think, yeah, I've got the experience, I've got the skills, I don't need to care about this company as much. I want to go to another company I've had my eye on for years. So I think I think to be a bit more forgiving as to whether, and I'm not talking this as a personal thing, like, oh, my portfolio. This is for everyone out there who feels the same way. That invest in the person. Take the time to read the paragraphs or to look at the images or anything else, because you might just find that if you invest in someone who's going to be there long term, you won't need to worry about hiring so often. And then that way you do save the time. But again, I think now, as you said, the TikTok, patience, attention span and patience is not there anymore. And I see that all the time when I'm trying to explain something in person. If someone just, well, I don't give my opinions on things. I generally like to keep my opinions to myself because I'm not interested in voicing them. But, people will, I say something and they instantly say, they don't take notice of every word in the sentence. I'll say, well, I'll probably, I don't know, just as a thing, I'll probably just get a Mercedes E-Class, for example. And of course, the key word being maybe. But sometimes when my interactions, and maybe this is why I like to be a recluse, this is one of the reasons why, is they say, oh no, but how, oh no, you don't know if you're going to get that. And I think, well, that's because it's maybe. And that's because their attention span is not there anymore. So you're absolutely right, Zach. I completely agree with you as to how the status quo is. It's just that I guess I disagree with it, not with you, but with it, in the sense of it shouldn't be like that. And that's probably my old-fashioned mentality, and it probably doesn't serve me well. But at least I can say, at least it's my own, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's if that's how you want to do it, that's how you have to do it. But you also then have to be accepting that you're not UXing the problem and you're just continuing it to do it your way. So if your portfolio isn't bringing the results you want, you need to look at that and evaluate where the problem is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always the responsibility of the person who owns it. But I will say that again, it's not always 100% the portfolio creator's fault. I mean, again, I've heard this from other people. Sometimes your portfolio just gets ignored, regardless of if it's one sentence, a paragraph. Sometimes, like you said, if a recruiter is really busy or a company, it might just be a case of the first port of call is the CV and then the portfolio. I mean, the only portfolio views I've had is people on LinkedIn. I've only had one recruiter. Well, I say recruiter. She was actually a UX lead designer, and she looked at my portfolio, which was really nice. And the fact is, because that got me an interview, she looked at my portfolio and my CV. That did get me an interview, so it does give me some confidence that my portfolio isn't half bad. It might not be the best. It might be in the bottom 100 of worst portfolios, but at least someone did see something in it. So it means that I'm not completely off the beaten track by
No, and
a lot, if I am.
sometimes people are great designers, but again, it's not about you if you're trying to get a job, it's about the company you're applying to, and that's just what you have to do. It's like if you're I don't know how many times I revised my portfolio because it just wasn't doing what I needed it to do. And even now, I think if I put it out there, I'm not going to get the results I want. So I'm going to have to redo it, knowing what I know now. So I think as a beginner, it's good just to don't rush into your portfolio. It's good to have one, but maybe take your time and look around and see how it's being done and get some feedback about what the people looking through them are actually looking for with the time that they do have. Because the reason they're hiring is they are overworked at the moment. They are fully booked. Like yesterday, I had from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5:30 meetings back to back to back to back, and it's I still had to do interviews in between, and I had to look over portfolios in between. And where's my time? So somebody's portfolio really better speak to me. It doesn't matter if it's animated or if it just doesn't matter. I just want to, if it catches my eye, I'm going to read it. If it's along the lines of what I'm looking for, and then if I do read it and it is going to take me a full day to read it, I might save it and try to read it later. But at the same time, if it's something that sticks in my brain, I'm gonna call that person. You know what I mean? Like it'll get stuck there, so I'll
Yeah,
think about it later. And I know if I'm personally not getting a call back on my resume, it's because I'm not sticking in somebody's brain. There's something going on, and I need to fix it.
well, yeah. Well, I think with resumes, I mean, it's that ATS system. Most of the time, they're scanning for the keywords in certain key positions. But I will say this with the portfolio, I think it's better to have just, especially when you're starting out, to have just two or three really good case studies rather than five or six that are unfinished or rushed through. I think that is important. So, because that would also show that if you're going to be on a project, you're going to be sticking at it. You're going to be sticking with the deadlines and everything else. And it gives the impression that you're willing to stick with a project, even when there are boring points on it.
Exactly.
So I would say And that was the advice I was also given by my tutor and mentor, is just to have, again, in the beginning, just to have a couple of good, deep case studies showcasing the UX, the UI, rather than five or six or seven where they look rushed. And again, it's like with your CV. I mean, for example, if I'm able to get a job in UX, or I probably just settle for a call center job or whatever, when I feel that any job I've got an experience is better, and I need to keep my CV to 2 pages, I will cut out my supermarket experience because it's not no longer relevant. And I think you have to do that with a portfolio. So for me, in my opinion, even if you're an experienced UX designer, I think, as given the fact that everyone improves regardless of how many years of experience they have, I think that you think, well, actually, this was my fifth project I did 5 years ago. It's not really doing anything over what I've done lately, which does a lot more. And I think you have to filter it down. So even for senior or veteran UX, UI designers, I think it's still important to not have so many case studies on your portfolio, especially if people aren't going to look at all of them.
I would say maximum four, and maybe I saw a few like this and I actually really liked it. One was basically a summary inside, but when you saw the outside of that case study, so what you would have to click on, it was like a breakdown of the key stats from that case study. Like, here's what's important, here's what the outcome was, here was the value. And they were all listed that way, but they had one that was like a summary, two that were summarized in sections, but it still explained the process, and then one that was super in depth, but it focused on their area of expertise. Like it focused on what they were good at, and they put value in what they were good at. That to me, when I looked through that, I was like, that would make me hire them specifically for that position, just because I can see that's where I will get my value from that person, as far as how they're designing.
What would you say, Zach? Just as a general question for those who may have this kind of question, what would you say is a good way to determine the length of text in a portfolio? Because on one hand, you want to have all of the relevant information, but on the other hand, you don't want to leave anything out, and you don't want it to be too short or too long. So, how
Here's
would you
here's the best
get
way
the
to,
balance for
yeah,
that? For
ex-
those for those who have that kind of question.
here's how you do it. Look at your entire design process, look at every step you took, evaluate which one brought value and which one was just there as a step at that point compared to the other ones. Highlight the ones that brought the most value and go into depth on those. The other ones list as honorable mention with the key points labeled, even bullet pointed. I don't care, but it's something quick. Somebody can read it, they get the point, and they move on. And when it's really that defining part of the process, because not every design process is the same. Like, maybe you got all your valuable information and research, but maybe user testing was really where the problem got solved. Then highlight that, show that. That's where the value is. Don't give me 12 paragraphs on each design process you took, because it's unnecessary and you're just wasting your own time. So I think if you're gonna do that, minimize the information that's in there and put the important information and really detail that important information. But not every step, honestly, as a UX designer, is not every step is not important. I've done interviews where the data I got back was garbage. It just didn't matter. Like, it didn't change my design at all. It didn't do anything. So why am I going to put that in my case study? Somebody's going to read it and be like, okay, so you wasted time then. Skip it and go to the
Yeah.
user
Okay.
testing.
Yeah, and then another question with that is, so we've just talked about the text. Again, it's the same question that people may have out there, that our listeners may have. How how many, for example, user journeys and would be good to include? Now, I know it would obviously depend on the project. So, for example, the project I'm working on with a very talented UI colleague who you know of, Zach. Um, I've only done, because it's only an information app. There's no sign on, there's no onboarding, there's nothing that a user needs to do. It's just to get information. my user journey is or user story is just one, because even though people will want, say, different cars to look up, they have to do the same process. But as an average, what would you say is the amount of user journeys and user stories and even user personas that someone should have on their portfolio? Again, I know it depends on the type of project they're doing, but even so, there would be a sort of average that is a safe bet. What would you say to that, Zach?
I've almost debated taking user personas out of my portfolio because I find it's based on fiction mostly anyway, and you'll find sometimes the results you get from actual users don't even come close to what you estimated with that user persona. So yeah, I don't know. I've gotten into the mode of why waste your time when you could spend it wiser and show the value, because that's what people are wanting out of viewing your portfolio. They want to see that value and they want to see it now. That'll get you even looked at, you know? But as far as like user journeys, it's good to have them. It's good to show you can do them. I wouldn't put a major focus on it if it doesn't bring value. But if the user journey was what turned your solution to that design into something more, then include it and showcase that. Showcase how you reiterated the user journey and found out you could eliminate pain points by adjusting. Like, that's a really good way to sell that specific part of your UX design process. But if you're just listing stuff to list it because your boot camp said you should put it in there, it's going to take, portfolios take a long time anyway. Why make them take longer with information that nobody cares about or that doesn't bring value to your project? And I think that comes along with time too. You'll start to see where that value was gained in a project. And that's why it's really important to study, or not study, but practice your design. Like, do a bunch of case studies. Do as many as you want. Don't put them all in your portfolio, but just do them. Problem solve. Get it done. And then you'll start to learn where the value is. And you'll start to, because again, I've had interviews that yield not great results. They didn't change my project at all. But I've also had interviews that changed everything because what I thought was not the case. And sometimes it's even the questions you ask. It's super, at some point it gets super nitpicky, like why you should include something or why you should not. But the simple answer is, if it doesn't add value to that case study, why mention it? Or why go into detail? Like, you're wasting your breath or damaging your keyboard for no reason at that point. So
If I may, I'll explain what I do. Again, I'm not trying to say this is correct. I'm just saying this is what I do. I don't have a single user story or user persona in any of my case studies. It hasn't been important to the case studies that I've done. The farthest I go to describe my users and my types of users is like one or two sentences, real quick, when it's relevant. Just saying, hey, these, or at least for my most recent project in which I worked on a platform for job seekers, I'll just explain really quick, like, oh, I worked on the like job seeker facing content. There are also like business users, like boot camps have actually signed up to use the platform, but I didn't work on that stuff. So I didn't even bother describing the three different types of users. All I said was, yeah, I worked on the user facing stuff. Like, that's really it. I'm not gonna put up a picture of a potential user and give them a fake name with what they do throughout their day, what their pain points are. I realize I don't really want to read that stuff in a portfolio, and so I'd rather not have it in mine. I might be wrong. That's what I do. That's what I feel confident in for my content.
Yeah, well, well, again, it's this is what I was also saying earlier. Is, you're injecting your own personality. You feel comfortable. You said it as well towards the start of the episode, that you're comfortable with it. Now, again, same for me. It's now whether our being comfortable with it is a good or a bad thing. Well, that is obviously up to other people. I mean, for me, so far, don't know if my feeling comfortable is necessarily doing me any good. But I think that regardless, what we can summarize with portfolios is just to make it relevant. Add a little bit of your personality into it, if especially the design, your homepage, your web page. But I would definitely recommend following a lot of what Zach says, because not only is he in a job now, but he's also doing interviews and he knows what he's looking for. So follow, even if you're like me, you don't necessarily agree with the way things are done, play by the rule book anyway. Just so you increase your chances. But I think that we've in this episode, I think we've really covered all of the bases that will hopefully help you for those of you listening out there, to really look at your portfolio. Even if you don't edit it or modify it, at least look at it, revise it every so often, think about what projects are more relevant to showcasing your talents. And of course, as always, you are more than welcome to message one of us, even myself. I can probably still give some points, some good points. But yeah, we hope that this episode has been really informative. We know that portfolios is a really hot topic, but we hope that you can walk away learning from this episode, from what we've talked about. And we're going to wrap up now, but we're so glad that you've been able to join us again, and we look forward to doing the next episode, and we will of course update you as soon as our episodes are released. So it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Will and Zach.
And
If you do the honors, boys.
Feel free to send us an email at framexframe.uxpod@gmail.com.
Yeah, and of course we do have a website. We have our Podbean website, which you can catch on any of my LinkedIn posts. You can email us if you're not sure about the link, and we're on a lot of channels. But we are mainly on Amazon and Apple. We are on Spotify, but we know that Apple is very popular, as indeed Amazon is. And of course, you will be able to get those links from my portfolio, from my profile on LinkedIn, along with Will's and Zach's, who will reshare the posts as well. So thank you very much once again. And we look forward to hearing you or seeing you on the next episode. Stay tuned. Thank you very much. And best of luck in your job searches for all of those who are looking for jobs.